Dear Excellencies, dear guests in the studio and all over the world virtually, a very warm welcome to our fourth conference on Human Rights Go Local. My name is Renate Kicker. I'm a former professor of public international law, a long-standing member in the Council of Europe Committee for the Prevention of Torture, still the head of the Human Rights Advisory Council of the Austrian National Human Rights Institute, and one of the directors of the UNESCO Center for Human Rights. Our today's conference commemorates the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the 70th anniversary of the Council of Europe European Convention of Human Rights.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste, auch
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I would also like to welcome you. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you here to the fourth conference on Human Rights Go Local. My name is Klaus Stahl. I am director of the UNESCO Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional level. Professor Kicker and I myself have the honor of being your facilitators today, so we will be moderating the event. The adoption of these documents 75 years ago were milestones of civilization. The fact that they are repeatedly undermined or devalued as being outdated is a proof of their importance. They are the most important corrective for the imbalance of power between rule and submission to the law. And we all see how important this is when we watch the news daily. But we can do a lot. We can do a lot at the small places. This is what Eleanor Roosevelt said when the Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. And this is why we are here today. For 3 days, our partners and some 100 participants from all over the world dedicated their time to an important topic. I would like to thank our partners for their contribution and also the students for their input. So all of us have been working for 3 days on the preparation and checking of national and municipal action plans for human rights. In order to ensure understanding, we are holding this conference in 4 languages this year: English, German, French, and Spanish. It's our great pleasure to welcome you here in this studio, and I would like to thank the editor-in-chief, Wolfgang Schaller, who is the host of this conference here, and we would like to thank them very much for making the studio available to us. Thank you very much.
Hello, and very warm welcome to all of you here in our television studio and to all others who follow our live stream. My name is Wolfgang Schaller and I'm the editor-in-chief of the ORF here in Graz. Today I'm a little bit nervous because it's not my daily job to give a speech in English, but it's a great honor to me and to us and a great pleasure that we host this conference called Human Rights Go Local. Human rights mean a lot to the people who work here. Even though our platforms and broadcasts focus on regional stories in Styria, we always try to put them in perspective and look at a broader picture. It is significant for this studio that we turn our gaze across our borders, not only to our direct neighbors, but sometimes also to Africa, South America, and Asia. According to that, we produced several documentaries concerning human rights initiatives all around the world. Another big activity that you probably know was the exhibition Facing Nations. The artist Oskar Stocker painted 124 portraits of members of the different communities that enrich the culture of Graz. We organized this exhibition, and as the oil on canvas paintings were pretty big, we had to show them in the Messe Graz. The reputation of Facing Nations became big also, and our former managing director, Gerhard Draxler, got a chance to present these paintings not only in Vienna, but also in the headquarters of the United Nations in New York. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon opened the exhibition there. By the way, the world famous TV director Rudi Dolezal made a very profound video and social advertisements called Face Human Rights. Last but not least, we are media partner in the youth campaign Know Your Rights under the administration of the Board for Human Rights in Graz in close partnership with the ETC. So you can see that this studio has tight bindings to the main theme of this event. I wish you an exciting and successful conference day here in our Landesstudio and on the screens worldwide. All the best to you.
Ja, herzlichen Dank. Und nachdem unsere Konferenz auch in gemeinsamer
Thank you very
Zusammenarbeit
much. Our conference has been organized in close cooperation with the University of Graz. It is now my great pleasure to ask the president of Graz University, Peter Riedler, for his welcoming words.
Vielen Dank. Dear Excellencies, honorary guests, colleagues, participants, and of course, hosts of the conference. It's a great pleasure to say a few words on occasion of the opening of today's conference. As you, of course, are aware of, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not just a document, it's a promise to humanity. It emphasizes the rights of every individual and forms the foundation of a fair and free society. Three values are closely linked to these values are closely linked to democracy, because only in democratic order human rights can be fully guaranteed and be protected. So it's a very special moment and gesture today, since we are, as we just heard, guests of the Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, and of course, radio, television, and today also social media. The media in general are the fourth power in a democracy, and this leads to the fact that democracy is more than just a form of government. It's a system based on respect for human rights, the rule of law, and respect for freedom of expression. Local governments, of course, play a crucial role in ensuring these principles, as they are directly confronted with the needs and concerns of citizens. This conference provides a unique opportunity to deepen the link between human rights and democracy. It strengthens the role of local governments in promoting these values. By sharing best practices and developing new strategies, we can help to empower democratic institutions and protect the rights of people, regardless of their social or cultural background. We face many challenges today, but there are also many opportunities to make the world a more inclusive place. Through dialogue, cooperation, and commitment, we can realize the vision of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and create a world in which everyone can live in dignity and freedom, or at least we can strive to realize the vision. Human rights and the demand for free education, research, and culture are firmly approached in the work of the University of Graz. In many ways, human rights are laid down in the so-called University's Development Plan. We have the professorship, UNESCO chair in human rights and human security. We have the UNESCO Center for the Promotion of Human Rights in Communities and Regions. The Refugee Law Clinic, an important initiative. And last but not least, the Human Rights Awards of the University of Graz. It's one of the most important honors awarded by the University of Graz. It has only been awarded 7 times since 1992 for outstanding services to freedom, justice, and peace, including to well-known personalities such as the Dalai Lama, Simon Wiesenthal, or Daniel Barenboim. We will continue this tradition by awarding the prize this year on the 22nd of March. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the University of Graz, I would like to welcome you to this important conference on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I thank you all for your commitment and willingness, of course, to work together on the important endeavor. May this conference not only lead to inspiring discussions, but also to accessible actions to strengthen democracy and protect human rights. Thank you very much.
Sehr geehrter Herr Rektor, sehr geehrter Herr
Mr.
Chefredakteur.
President, Mr. Editor-in-Chief, thank you very much for your welcoming words. And also thank you so much for the great support that you have been granting to the Academy and to this conference and to our cooperation. Thank you very much. You have made this conference possible. I would also like to add that we also have the High Commissioner for Human Rights here, and he is also one of the people who were awarded the Human Rights Award. Now I would like to welcome the mayor of the city of Graz, who was recently appointed world mayor. We are all very proud of this distinction that she received, and I would like to ask our mayor, Elke K., for her welcoming words. Thank you very much, Klaus. We already joked about that every individual citizen of Graz is a world citizen because I'm a world mayor, a distinction that I received. This distinction is an honor, and we are very proud, dear guests, who have traveled here from far away or who are listening in other countries. Have you? I would like to welcome you on behalf of the members of the Municipal Council of Graz, and I'd also like to welcome you on behalf of the state of Styria, also in the name of the Minister for Business Affairs, Aibinger Riedl. We are very proud, and this conference is being held here in Graz today. A lot has been said, and later on in the discussion, I will have the pleasure of debating or discussing the important topic of human rights and human rights go local. I will be contributing some concrete ideas from the perspective of the city of Graz. We discussed this topic at the city council this morning with a focus on living, on residential buildings, on housing. And I'm very grateful that my colleagues in the municipal council, in the government of the city of Graz, not only published a human rights report in a very high quality, and that all of us together always manage to putting the content of this report into reality, because this is what it's all about. And I'm very much looking forward to the deliberations this afternoon, to the discussion this afternoon. I wish you every success and all of us an inspiring conference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elke K., Mayor of the City of Graz. And now I would like to ask the Styrian Minister for Economic Affairs, Barbara Aibinger-Riedl, to come to the floor. She is representing the governor of Styria, Mr. Drexler, today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the governor of Styria and the Styrian government. I am very happy that we are sending such an important signal to the world and sending out a message with this important conference. Human rights play a very important role at the provincial political level here in Styria. This is also reflected in our current government program. Freedom, democracy, rule of law, and human rights, the four core pillars, form the basis for our work. And this is reflected in our government program. And I think it's important that we underline that. I also believe that it is essential that policymakers take account of that and that we embrace this topic in our everyday work. I'm very happy that we have a human rights coordinator in Styria. And since the year 2001, we present the Styrian Human Rights Award every 2 years. And this award honors activities and people who make an important contribution to human rights. It is also important to me to say that the Styrian Parliament is fully dedicated to human rights. A few years ago, we adopted the Charter for Living Together in Diversity in Styria. In this charter, we express our clear commitment to equal rights at all levels, regardless of sex, skin color, religion, first language, tradition, or ideology. We believe in diversity in the state of Styria. Ladies and gentlemen, especially in a region where we are closely networked with other international communities, where we have universities, where we have research institutions, this must be a matter of course. The government is also aware that we will only fill this topic with life if we have people in the regions, in the cities, who are committed to defending human rights. And therefore, I'm so grateful that your conference puts the local governments and the municipal governments into the limelight. It is the local politicians and the mayors who are closest to the citizens who earn the trust of their people. So if you want to root human rights firmly at the local level, we need the commitment of local and municipal politicians. I'm very happy that this topic is being debated here today. It was mentioned earlier. This is a topic that we have to defend every day. Rule of law, democracy, and the other values must be defended and fought for on a daily basis. And your conference is one contribution to that. I'd like to thank you very much for holding this conference. And I wish us all inspiring deliberations and discussions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Thank you also for stressing the importance of cities and regions, because they play an important role in defending human rights at the local and regional level. Thank you for stressing their responsibility. We would also like to focus on the national level, and now it's my great pleasure to welcome Ambassador Thun Hohenstein, who is representing the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria, Mr. Schallenberg. Madam Deputy Secretary General, Madam Minister, Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. When the UNESCO Center for Human Rights was officially opened in Graz in May 2021, no one of us had an idea of how much the world would be dominated by crises, multiple crises in 2024. People feel very insecure. One of the most important achievements of our civilization, namely liberal democracy, is under pressure worldwide. The brutal war of aggression in Ukraine continues. The situation in the Middle East is explosive. And in many parts of the world, journalists continue to be threatened. And in many cases, they are even injured or murdered. And the list could go on. Against this background, the important role of an effective multilateralism and the importance of human rights cannot be overestimated. More than ever, we need stable conditions, predictability, and we need a sense of security. We have to fight for that feeling of security through respecting a rules-based order, and the human rights should be the basic set of values that provides guidance in all of this. We will also urgently need this guidance to overcome two of the major challenges of the century, namely the climate crisis and the rapid advance of artificial intelligence. The concept of digital humanism must help to ensure that it's not the machine that works for people and not the other way around, that it must ensure that machine work for people. And this fourth Winter Academy of the UNESCO Center for Human Rights in Graz has one key topic: accountability in everyday life. Especially when things seem to be going haywire in the world, it is of the utmost important that we protect and promote human rights at the grassroots level, at the basic level. The role of the civil society in the realization of the human rights cannot be overestimated. We once had an Austrian president, namely Rudolf Kirchschläger, who said peace starts at home. And this also applies to human rights. It is an arduous path towards a better, fairer society, and this arduous path always starts at the local level, at the regional level, and then it continues to develop up to a global level. Last year, we had 2 anniversaries, 75 years of the Declaration of Human Rights and 30 years of the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights. And these events provided us with a fresh momentum for the future viability of human rights. It is with this in mind that I wish you every success for today, but also for the future activities of your center. The importance of the human rights city of Graz is recognized worldwide. And so it is no coincidence that the only UNESCO Center for Human Rights at the local and regional levels was founded in the city of Graz. And therefore, it is very important to me to thank the state of Styria and the city of Graz for deciding to fund the center for another 5 years. Thank you very much for that. I wish you inspiring presentations, discussions, and deliberations. And I would like to thank all the participants for this conference and the participants at the Winter Academy for their commitment. Thank you very much.
We are grateful for UNESCO's support and partnership in many efforts, and also in the constant ambition to promote the topic of human rights by our dear Assistant Director General, Gabriela Ramos, who cannot be with us personally, however, provided us with her statement from the international perspective.
Dear participants, I am pleased to address you at the closing of the 4th Human Rights Academy. This year, we discussed how to translate human rights norms into real change, and I congratulate you for being there. Available data revealed a significant divergence between the standards on anti-discrimination and realities on the ground. For example, in Europe, that is one of the places that measures these things, the exposure of individuals of African descent to racism, discrimination, and hate crimes has increased since 2016 from 39% to 45%. In the current context of conflict and confrontation all over the world, we also know that the acts of anti-Semitism is growing exponentially, and we need to be really careful. Hate against Muslim, I mean, it's everywhere, and we need to be conscious and push for building a more inclusive and respectful world. That's why I'm very happy to contribute to this discussion. Members of this group in the Afro-descendants also face a threefold higher likelihood of dropping out of school early. Local governments has enormous potential to make a difference so that policies do not remain empty words. You are for action. Practices from across the world, including tool, resources, institution, mechanisms, and commitments, show what leadership and decisive action can achieve for the well-being of the city and also for its inhabitants. For example, the councils created by Nantes, Stockholm, Toronto, and San Francisco to provide migrants with a minimum political representation are worth noticing. The initiatives of Plotbit and Dartmouth to use sports as means for boosting education outcomes for Roma children are inspiring. And the efforts of our City for Human Rights, Graz, Turin, and Madrid to counteract discrimination in the housing markets is also something that we need to look and to learn from. All these examples show how the proximity to the problems, but the commitment to address them, can trigger a strong government impact. It is therefore no surprise that UNESCO has prioritized local level action in enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation for inclusion and against racism. In 2004, we launched the Coalition for Inclusive and Sustainable Cities, also known as ICAR, which includes 600 strong global front against racism and discrimination. And this led to the ICAR, which is the coalition in Europe. An important leverage for accountability is the 10-point plan of action for the coalition. It embodies the commitment from the member cities to combat discrimination in areas such as education, employment, housing provision, and cultural activities, so it's very concrete. Its content is adapted to the specificities of each regional and national branch of ICAR. Signatory cities undertake to integrate through inclusive and participatory processes this plan of actions in their policies and strategies. And we commend those that really have pushed the boundary and deliver on this action plan. And worth mentioning is the reporting mechanisms of the European coalition. The voluntary reporting by cities allows identifying progress, trends, and need for job action through the coalition, but it also allows for learning from inspiring and even from being in the failed cases that can teach us also a lot. And therefore, this is a tool that we should leverage in the coming years for our commitments. The Asia-Pacific Coalition is also developing a city marker system where indicators for urban inclusion will enable members to report in alignment with the 10-point plan of action. So this is really not only talking, it's really walking the talk. And another illustration of our efforts to strengthen the accountability is the progress since 2021 through the annual Global Forum Against Racism and Discrimination that UNESCO launched. In the third edition of November 2023 in Sao Paulo, we established a network of anti-racism and anti-discrimination officials. Of all these champions, fantastic champions that I'm sure are also among the participants of this very important conference. The 16 founding members committed to share knowledge and expertise in advocating anti-racism law, anti-discrimination laws, and institutions. The new UNESCO anti-racism toolkit will help setting up ambition and really look at how we can strengthen our action on anti-racism and anti-discrimination policies, and will be piloted with member states and members of the network. So we have all the infrastructure, we have the champions, we have the knowledge, and we have the data that show us that we need to step up, to speed up, and to make more efforts to fight discrimination and to uphold human rights and human dignity. So let me conclude by stressing how proud we are for the International Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional levels under the auspices of UNESCO and the UNESCO Chair in Human Rights and Human Security. They carry our pioneering work to promote participatory research toward informing local policy making and action. And I would also like to thank the Austrian authorities and their commitments and continued support, and also all the long-standing partners of the Human Rights Academy for their dedication. I look forward to our future collaboration, especially in this ICAR 20th anniversary, as we continue to confront these challenges together with courage, with compassion, and solidarity.
Thank you very much. It is now my utmost pleasure, given my long-term relationship with the Council of Europe, to welcome personally the recently elected President of the Council of Europe's Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, Mark Coles. Mark Coles is Councillor in UCCLE in Belgium and engaged in accountability regarding allocation and use of citizens' money. He was a rapporteur of the Congress in the field of corruption. Dear President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Vielen Dank. I will speak in French for the translation. Madame la maire, Monsieur le directeur, mesdames et messieurs, en vos titres et qualités, je tiens tout d'abord à remercier la maire de Graz et le directeur
Ich möchte
du
mich
Centre.
ganz herzlich bedanken. I would like to thank the mayor of Graz, LKK, and the director of the International Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional level, Klaus Stahl. Thank you very much for inviting me. Madam Mayor, you have an incredible town you are in charge of with a lot of history. But Graz is not only a city full of history. It is a city of human rights. And for many, many years, you have been working so hard. In 2015, for example, in Graz, the Graz Declaration had been adopted for regions and municipalities. Back then, 25 municipalities, cities, and provinces were part of the declaration. And you can see that here. You can also have a look at it. You can have a look at the report. It's actually quite thick. It's quite heavy, this report on human rights. I am not sure I will take the paper version home with me, but it's very, very complete. And it shows very clearly all the incredible, rich and manifold activities that you have here. And I'm really, really proud that I can speak to you today and talk about human rights at the local and regional levels. This is a topic where a lot is happening at the moment, particularly with regards to the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. The Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, CLRAE, is something that you may not know. It's a political assembly of the Council of Europe, whose members are local and regional elected officials, mayors, regional presidents, city and regional councillors from the 46 member states of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is a political institution whose mission is to promote and strengthen local and regional democracy in the 46 member states of the Council of Europe, i.e., in all European countries except the Russian Federation and Belarus. Through the work of its members, who are all elected, local and regional officials, it promotes the coordination and dialogue between governments and local and regional authorities. It also promotes the exchange of experience and good practice. And this year it celebrates its 30th anniversary, 30 years of promoting and defending democratic values in Europe. It is also the Congress that oversees the implementation of the European Charter of Local Self-Government in the member states, and thus the development of local and regional democracy on our continent. And in 2019, I was here in Graz in my function as a rapporteur. The Charter is an international treaty that came into force on September 1st, 1988. It contains rights for local politicians, which, if honored, ensure a healthy local and regional democracy in the states. I think it is worth mentioning that this treaty has been ratified by all 46 member states of the Council of Europe. By monitoring the state of local democracy in Europe, we in the Congress are particularly well placed to scrutinize the human rights situation in our communities, not only to monitor the implementation of human rights, but also to sensitize politicians and administration at local and regional level to their responsibilities in the field of human rights. In this way, we can ensure that our communities offer equal protection to all their inhabitants without discrimination. As you know, the defense of democratic values presupposes respect for human rights, just as respect for human rights presupposes respect for the implementation of democratic values in a state governed by the rule of law. Although the Congress has always been in favor of democracy and its human rights, its tasks were clarified after the 4th Summit of Heads of States and Government held in Reykjavik in May. The European heads of state and government recognized in the Reykjavik Declaration the role of local and regional authorities in the functioning of our democracies and in addressing challenges to human rights and the rule of law. I emphasize this important development because this has not always been the case. For a long time, member state governments tended to see human rights as a matter for the central level. Why? Well, there are several reasons for this, but we need to say it very clearly. We, due to the manifold crisis that we have been experiencing or are experiencing, for example, the crisis in Ukraine, this shows that local and regional politicians and decision makers are always at the forefront, and they also are in charge or are stand up for the rights of the people who they are in charge of. I'm talking about Abuja, for example, and I just recently met the Ukrainian ambassador who told me that 370 schools were completely destroyed, 20,000 people were kidnapped in the territories that Russia is currently occupying. There are other examples, of course. Not all of the countries are facing such a situation, thankfully. However, we are all, I mean, there are other examples: pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss. We are all facing that today, and there are other crises that we are confronted with, and cities and regions need the right to a healthy environment. When in our regions and cities we are faced with drought, fires, floods, earthquakes, and natural disasters, which of course have become more frequent and more violent due to climate change, we must use our imagination and above all our resilience within the limits of our competences and financial resources to protect our fellow citizens and to guarantee their right to a healthy environment. In another area, when we have to authorize a demonstration on public streets to guarantee the exercise of freedom of expression, for example, or to prohibit it in the name of a risk of disturbing public order, well, we have to make a choice that is not insignificant because it guarantees or it restricts a fundamental right for our citizens. The way in which certain human rights are applied sometimes gives rise to debate. This is particularly true in the area of migration and also what some perceive as an abuse of the right to asylum. Regardless of the opinions on the subject, it is still the local authorities who are often confronted with the large influxes of refugees. The examples are numerous and varied and reveal the extent of our responsibility as elected representatives of the people in the area of human rights. The European Court of Human Rights has clearly emphasized this in its extensive case law in cases concerning the local and regional level. In October last year, the Congress adopted a strategy for the implementation of human rights at local level and regional level. This strategy, which my colleague Gudrun Mösler-Tonström presented in Austria the day before yesterday. And this strategy will serve as a guideline for the work of the Human Rights Congress. It will guide the members of the Congress in their determination to develop active governance in citizen regions, focusing on the implementation of rights and freedoms so that citizens can live in dignity and with respect for the fundamental rights. The Congress will also develop guidelines aimed at ensuring that elected officials implement judgments of the European Court of Human Rights issued against their own state for an act of omission at the local level that has resulted in a violation of a right guaranteed by the Convention. And as the heads of state in Reykjavik have recognized, we must also take a greater account of the essential role of civil society and young people in particular. The involvement of young people in public life at local level is not new. A long time ago, the Congress has been starting to promote the active participation of young people in civic life as a means of ensuring social cohesion and anchoring democratic principles in a society based on respect for human rights. Human rights education must remain a priority, and I believe that we must pay particular attention to strengthening and transmitting democratic values and principles, perhaps also to say a certain ethics in local governance. And therefore, the revision of the European Charter of the Participation of Young People in Local and Regional Life from 1992 also seems to me to be a further necessary step to further emphasize the importance of human rights in the participation of young people in local politics. Our municipalities and various authorities can also encourage initiatives such as the creation of UNESCO clubs in our schools. I myself, between 14 and 17, I took part in the activities of the UNESCO club that existed at the school where I was, the Athenaeum. I learned a lot from that. I subscribed to the UNESCO Courier, which described itself as an open window to the world. And that's exactly what UNESCO is. You can't emphasize that enough, because clubs of this kind, which allow us to get to know others, their history and their culture better, contribute to respect for others and also to respect for human rights. Rights are universal. These rights are based, as the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 states, on the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, the protection and enforcement of human rights is a shared responsibility shared by all levels of governance, including civil society. However, it is easier to assume one's own share of responsibility if we all realize the extent of our responsibility and our potential for innovation in developing human rights-based governance. The Council of Europe was built on the determination of European heads of states and governments to unite around the values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. It is a shared responsibility which, in order to be successfully implemented, needs to be realized at all levels of government, and it requires full cooperation and synergies with all national and international actors in the field of human rights. In the Congress, we have started to implement the decision taken in Reykjavik, and we will do so through increased cooperation with our institutional partners and with you. This event at the beginning of this year, and I would particularly thank the International Center for the promotion of human rights at the local and regional level under the auspices of UNESCO. I'd like to thank you, and also you, Madam Mayor, and the region. I would like to thank you because this center has done exceptional work also today with this conference. I would also like to thank the city of Graz, with which the Congress has been cooperating for a long time, and many other cities are inspired by the work that you do and by the fact that you are a human rights city. Finally, I would also like to thank all of you for your valuable contributions to the discussions that have taken place over the last few days and which have strengthened us even further in our convictions. On behalf of the Congress, I pledge to widely disseminate a final document in the local authorities around the world, which encourages local authorities around the world to develop and implement binding action plans to fulfill their responsibilities in defense of human rights. The Congress, which I represent, looks forward to continuing to work with you all and to contributing to the next edition of the Winter Academy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Monsieur le Président, merci beaucoup. Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, für...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your speech and for your recognition, for recognizing the work that you do. I am now very happy that Mr. Tichy is here with the final document that Mr. Kohls already mentioned. We're together with representatives of local governments and also with representatives of international organizations. It's wonderful to be able to enter in discussion.
My name is Helmut Tichy. I'm the former legal advisor of the Austrian Foreign Ministry, and as such, I was for many years responsible for Austria's human rights policy internationally. I'm also professor at the University of Graz and at the Vienna Diplomatic Academy, and now it becomes more relevant for our meeting here, and I'm member of the Council of Europe Committee of Experts Against Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. And in this function, I have already become aware of the great and important role local communities play in the fight against domestic violence, but also and in particular in protecting victims of domestic violence. So very much can be done in this aspect at the level of local communities. Now, my task first is to introduce the panelists here. And I would like to just simply mention that we are very pleased to have Mayor Carr again on the panel and here. I don't think she needs any introduction. Let me just express at this moment that I think we are all very proud that you are the Mayor of the Year, the prize winner of the World Mayor Prize. And I looked it up in the internet. It's a prize given to mayors that show a lot of altruistic engagement. And that is something which is really important for the implementation of human rights. And congratulations from us. Now, the other panelists here, I continue on my right here. There is Mr. Louis Lettington. Mr. Louis Lettington is of UN Habitat. UN Habitat is a branch of the UN, mainly based in Nairobi, but he's from Geneva. He's the chief of the Land, Housing and Shelter section of UN Habitat. He's a lawyer and has expertise in many areas of international law. I don't want to listen them because we could get into an expert discussion on this. So thank you for being here. Then I would like to mention next Mr. Pradeep Wagel. He is from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, an office that was established as a follow-up to the Vienna Declaration adopted 30 years ago that was already mentioned today. And if I look at his curriculum, he has served in so many places in Southeast Asia, from Cambodia to Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and something which today I think has gained additional interest. He was the head of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Gaza for a while. And I'm sure he could tell us a lot about that, but this may not be the topic of today's conference. Then I continue with the presentations and go to my right. And here I find Madame Nayat Sarouk of Morocco. She's the director of the development branch and of the African Local Government Academy, headquartered in Rabat in Morocco, Academy of the United Cities and Local Government of Africa. She is based in Rabat, as I said. She has great experience in public institutions. She was director for legal studies at the Studies Decentralized Cooperation and Documentation Department and served in a number of international functions, member of the board of Arab Women's Leadership Institute, and in the UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration, and so on and so on. She has got a lot of experience and taken many important initiatives concerning women's rights and local communities. And then we have Ms. Evelyn Obulor. She's from the European Coalition of Citizens Against Racism. I understand that she is living in Heidelberg in Germany. She is the director of this European coalition, and she has also served as an anti-racism officer of the city of Heidelberg. She is working together with many grassroots organizations in the field of anti-racism, diversity, empowerment, and she is the editor of a collection of edits of essays called Schwarz wird großgeschrieben, so black written in capital letters, about the special experiences of black people in Germany, I understand. And the last person I have to present here is Mr. Alexander Lesegang of the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns. He is Viennese, like myself, and as you know, the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns is an association that has as members the larger communities, larger local communities here in Austria. His experience and his responsibilities in this association cover Europe, international affairs, but also integration and migration. So I think that was the presentation. And now let me just mention, before we go into the discussion, that it was announced by the director that I would like to draw your attention to the result of this academy that has taken place here. That was the academy, as already mentioned, on the topic of human rights, go local, what works, taking place here in Graz, but also in a hybrid format in the last 3 days. And they have come out with an outcome document on this issue, Accountability in Action, Human Rights Action Plans of Local Governments. And this is a fascinating and very detailed document with first a reference to the main partners. I think they have been mentioned before, but it's UNESCO, of course, and it's the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and it's UN Habitat, and it's I forgot the online participants. That is very true, because I'm sorry, they are just online. So I did not see them, which is the reason for forgetting them. I apologize. And I want to mention that as online participants, we have 2 persons. We have Elliot King, cabinet member for equalities of the human rights and culture of Swansea Council, Swansea in Wales, of course, and also from Swansea, Adele Dunstan, strategic equalities and human rights coordinator. Welcome, and I apologize for as I haven't seen you, I made this great mistake. And we have, there was this wasn't so sure, so very good. We managed to connect also to Ali Raposo, very good. So we have a third online participant, the coordinator of the Human Rights Committee of the Council of the City of Winnipeg in Manitoba in Canada. Welcome. Now, I go back to the outcome document, which mentions our partners. The applause was for welcoming the participants online, I imagine. So the partners are UNESCO, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Habitat, then the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe, where we have just had the privilege of listening to the president, also representative of the beautiful city of Uccle in Brussels, which I know and love very well, and the United Cities and Local Governments of Africa. And the document has a long preamble, very detailed preamble, but then comes up with recommendations, or as it is called here, encouragements. And we will have the opportunity in the discussion to go into some of these encouragements and seek the views of the panelists, both assembled here and also online, on some of these encouragements. Let me turn now to the first round and to two encouragements, which I would like to mention and read out to you. These are for those who have the document, and these are the encouragements 2 and 11. And these encouragements, as they are called, and what is their task, is encouraging local level governments worldwide to do the following things. Now, 2 is to localize the sustainable development goals and international human rights standards to the needs and opportunities of the population, stakeholders, and local governments in the local human rights action plan to ensure their effective implementation. So to localize these goals in the local human rights action plan. And 11, to monitor the implementation of the human rights action plan, to assess progress and results in the realization of human rights, which is an essential component of local accountability. And this is the word that will come up again and again, because this is what we are so interested in here, how to achieve accountability. This was also the first word of this document, accountability in action, human rights action plans for local governments, which allows me now to come to the first round of comments on these particular 2 encouragements. And there I would like to ask the following question and I will start with Mayor Carr. From your point of view, what makes an action plan successful or effective, and why? And why do you think what do you think about these encouragements that are now contained in the outcome document? Do you agree with them, or do they seem rather overwhelming and impossible to implement? Please, Mayor Carr, could you please reply to this question?
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Of course, Frau Bürgermeisterin, yeah. Of course, all the documents, and I would like to thank Klaus Stahl and his team for compiling and for drawing up these very comprehensive reports. But paper will only be of value if the content of the document is read, if it is analyzed and discussed, and if we implement the encouragements. You said that Graz managed to achieve many things over the past few years. We not only have a Human Rights Council in Graz that was established some years ago. What is also important for me to mention is that we always take unanimous decisions in human rights matters, and we have many independent advisory boards. We have a climate board, a children's ombuds office, a children's parliament. We even have a child mayor who is elected by her fellow pupils. We have a board for inclusion, a board for senior citizens. In this board for inclusion, we have various other private initiatives incorporated. Graz also has a women's advisory board. This is also an independent organization, and the city of Graz always tries its best to provide funds so that some of these positions can be funded and people don't have to take them up in their free time on a voluntary basis. And these boards, these councils provide suggestions to policymakers. They make recommendations and point the finger to things that go into in the wrong direction. So they provide guidance, so to speak. They are critical, and it is important that policymakers ensure the independence of these courts and advisory boards. And for a long time, Graz has also had a board for migration, where migrants, for people who have been living in Graz for years, for decades, who pay their taxes, but still are not Austrian citizens and are therefore not entitled to vote, which I believe is a shame. But that's a personal remark of mine, because I believe that if you live in a country for a long period of time, and if you pay taxes, then you should also have the right to vote. But this is my personal opinion. So it is very important to mention that we have an interreligion board that was established when Graz was cultural capital of Europe. It is important that all the various religions that we have in a city have a say in political topics, in important political topics. Last autumn, we agreed to organize a day of religions in Graz. This will be a possibility to debate important topics such as peace, to fight against racism, to fight against nationalism, and where the religions can make public statements. All the religious communities in Graz have many members, and they are important for life and coexistence. I think that these religious communities are important because they provide community, a sense of community to people, but it is also important that they take a joint stance in social issues. And I'm very happy that we managed to organize this Day of Religions, which will be held this autumn. So these were just a few examples of the city of Graz. So what's the message? Of course, as a city government, we are in charge in cooperating and in supporting our citizens, not only with regard to education or nursing or other supplies. We have to make sure we have people from more than 160 nations, and 29 of them are not Austrian citizens. So it is very important to include all citizens, to leave nobody behind, and to make sure that they can benefit from all the services that we provide in the city, whether it's social housing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education or other fields. This is important. We have room for improvement in some areas, and this is mainly in areas that we cannot influence. So there is a need for national legislation to enable us to become better. And I think that's it for me for the moment. But the recommendations and the encouragement in the final outcome document and the action plans are, of course, something that we always take seriously. All these encouragements are important and therefore they need to be put into practice. Thank you very much.
Reference once again to the human rights report of Graz, which is really exemplary. Now we cross, if it is technically possible, the Atlantic and go to Winnipeg, to Ali Raposo. Are you there? Can you hear me? And could you?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Wonderful. So having a human rights action plan that is tailored to your municipality and the needs of the population absolutely helps when setting tangible goals. I do very much so think that the encouragements align and would be beneficial to implement. Being transparent with the action plan and objectives is ultimately going to help the success of the plan. So this provides a level of accountability and an ongoing monitoring and reporting, which ultimately ensures an effective and worthwhile implementation.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we go on. We ask another online participant from Swansea, Elliot King. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I'm here.
Please let us have your comment.
Yeah, thank you. I think if it's possible, I think my colleague Adele was going to just make a comment on this on this point, if that's okay.
Okay, yes, we are very interested to hear what you have to say.
Hi, thank you. These two encouragements are absolutely correct, and actually both of them are very important to our current human rights work in Swansea. I'm just going to touch a bit upon what we're already doing within that field. So we are in a unique and fortunate position in Wales where we have the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, which has directly localised the Sustainable Development Goals. It requires all public bodies to think about the long-term impact of their decisions, to work better with people, communities and each other to prevent persistent problems such as poverty, health, inequalities and climate change. And so from this act, all local authorities have a duty to form a public service board with representatives from other local public bodies in the area, like the health board, the police, the fire service. And we've also got the city's universities on the board and the voluntary council board, and also representatives from Natural Resource Wales. And so each public service board has to develop a local wellbeing plan. And it's within this plan that the commitment was made by all the partners to become a human rights city. So this partnership worker model offers huge opportunity to make long-lasting positive change to both current and future generations, and has been essential to drive our human rights work forward in Swansea. And it is through this mechanism that we formed a human rights city steering group about 3 years ago. So in terms of like localizing other international human rights standards, again, Swansea Council here, we have done a tremendous amount of work prior to becoming a human rights city. In 2014, we embedded the UNCRC into our decision-making process. We were the first local authority to do this in Wales. We're also a city of sanctuary for refugees and asylum seekers. We're a dementia-friendly city. We're working towards being an aging well city, and also looking into adopting the UN Convention on the Rights of the Disabled Person on that local level. And as it happens, human rights awareness is also one of our human rights city priorities and an objective in our action plan. And I think this is particularly poignant because our priorities were chosen by the public in Swansea, showing that people do want to learn about their human rights and why they are important. For an action plan to be successful and effective for us, it is essential that there are clear priorities and objectives, and that there are the robust monitoring and evaluation processes in place. It has also been important to have that political leadership and senior managers involved to ensure that resources are put in place, and also early and continuous engagement with the public to ensure that they are on the journey with us. We've held a number of public engagement events. We regularly visit networks and forums and schools across the city to update them and keep them informed on our work. Also, another important point for us here is make sure that we incorporate our human rights work with our other strategic and corporate plans. That's been quite integral. Through the UK's Equality Act, all public bodies have a duty to create a strategic equality plan on a 4-year cycle. But we in Swansea this year have gone one step further to integrate our human rights action plan with our strategic equality plan. Therefore, we are duty-bound to report to the full council of elected members, the Equality and Human Rights Commission of Wales, and also to make this plan and strategy public. And this puts human rights at the forefront of our equality works. I think also it is important to note that because we've done this as a partnership approach, when you are working on the same aim with partners, flexibility is key in your own individual plans and approaches, just to ensure that the monitoring arrangements and the details in the plan fully reflects the type of organisations they are and the services that they provide. And one final point, if I may, monitoring the effectiveness of our human rights actions and our plans is a key component of our work, as well as having that mechanism through the UK's Equality Act. The steering group meets monthly. We will report on a quarterly basis to the Public Service Board. And we're also right now establishing and developing a public human rights stakeholder panel, where any member of the public and representative of an organisation based in Swansea can join. And they will receive regular reports from us and have the opportunity to ask us questions and then to help us to identify any gaps in our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And thank you for mentioning the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, because I think there very much can be done at the local level to implement this convention. Thank you also for mentioning the importance of involving high-level senior staff, otherwise it wouldn't work. Thank you. Now we go on with this question about action plans, and should there be action plans and what would make them successful and effective. And I go on to the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns. Mr. Lesigang, please.
Ja, als erstes möchte ich mich ganz herzlich bedanken.
I'd like to thank you for inviting us as the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns. Thank you for inviting us to present an input. Perhaps, if I may, I'd like to present the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns. This association will celebrate its 110th anniversary next year. We are representing 2,093 municipalities and cities. This is about 12% of municipalities and cities, but it's also about 2/3 of the population of Austria, who lives in these cities that we represent. So basically, it's mainly the bigger cities like Graz, Linz, Salzburg, and so on and so forth, but also smaller cities and towns with centralized functions. So 2/3 of our members have fewer than 10,000 inhabitants. With this presentation, I'd like to explain our perspective. One aspect that I'd like to share is that we have two interest representations for that in Austria, the Association of Cities and Towns and the Association of Municipalities, and almost 90% of them are members in both associations, so in the Cities of Towns ones and in the municipalities ones. Membership is voluntary, so all of the cities and towns can join us voluntarily. I think there are 2 municipalities in Austria that are not member of any of them, but we are very successful because we almost have 100% coverage, even though the membership is voluntary and the members pay the fees voluntarily. Well, action plans are something very valuable because they are a tool to be used to move forward. Agenda 2030 is also something that I take care of within this Association of Cities and Towns in Austria, and we do have a number of tools that we use in order to share the contents as practicable as possible, but also to explain the content, because sometimes the content is highly complex. 17 SDGs and 269 sub-goals, and that's something that also needs to be communicated. How will they be called? How will we explain the content? So yeah, these are things that we look at our work. And the experiences that we've gained from this work, from this communication work in terms of the Agenda 2030 is something that can also really be used well for action plans in terms of human rights. I think we can use that very well as well. And again, even if we look at a topic level, there are so many synergies. If you fulfill the 17 SDGs, well, then basically, I think human rights will also be fulfilled, at least to a very, very large extent. So what I'm trying to say is that this networking, linking, connecting, looking for synergies is something that I find a very good idea, particularly if we, with our work as representatives or of an association that represents interests, well, we know very well where the problems in the cities and municipalities are. And one of these problems is staff, a shortage of staff. We do need to find people who can also do that work. And that's actually something else I'd like to mention. It's very important. If we look at smaller towns, for example, it's really important to find people who care about that, who are personally involved, either from the administrative side or from the political side, but we need people who want to work on it. We want to find a carer, somebody who takes care of that, and someone who doesn't give up in town, who just keeps ringing doorbells in the cities when something doesn't go well. And this is the art, to find these people in the municipalities and cities and towns and provide them with the tools that they need so that they can also implement the goals that we formulated. Monitoring is also something that I'd like to mention. Also from a personal point of view at work, whenever the word monitoring is mentioned and someone says, oh, do I have to write a report? Do I make a set of statistics? So in the cities and municipalities, well, that's where people work. They represent the political level, the administrative level, and they do have human traits, and these are traits that we need to consider and use them in the best positive way.
Thank you very much also for stressing the need for personal commitment of individual persons that are doing the job, that are drafting the action plans and that are implementing the action plans and that do the heavy job of preparing reports for monitoring, which is quite a task. Now, after these replies, we turn to the international organizations, to Habitat and to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And there are some more specific issues we would like to discuss with you. So there's a question, what aspects need to be paid particular attention to when localizing the SDGs? And based on your experience as an international organization or representative of an international organization operating worldwide, what are the key success factors of local human rights action plans? And I would like to ask you, Mr. Lewis Lettington, to start on behalf of UN Habitat, please.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I won't waste too much time on pleasantries, but it really is very much appreciated, and congratulations for what you're doing, both at the level of the center and very much at the level of the city as well. The question of what to pay attention to, I mean, obviously one could go with 300 plus indicators and goals and targets. One could have quite a long conversation, but I would think that needs to start with the recognition that the SDGs and the whole framework is not something that is external and other and abstract. It is very much to do with the lives that we all live. Some of the elements of it are very direct. Do you have a house? Do you have food? Do you have healthcare and education? Some of them might be a little bit more removed, the environment that we live in and these sorts of things. But they are all about how do we improve the quality of life for everybody. So it isn't, oh my gosh, there's another big international list that I've got to tick the boxes on. I think it's important to recognize that it comes down to the quality of life of each of us and the people that we work for and with. So I think that central element is there. Related to that, the SDGs are universal. They're not about one particular group of countries or one particular group within any given society. Everybody benefits if we get the SDGs right. And if we get them wrong, we will all pay the price and face the risks. We have a long way to go. So they are also aspirational, and I think we have to remember that. They related to that question of aspiration is the fact that the SDGs and human rights are not two different things. This was one of the big steps of moving from the Millennium Development Goals into the SDGs, is the SDGs are very firmly human rights based. And on that side, there is a sense of aspiration of these represent the society that we want to be. In many respects, we may already be being able to demonstrate and to show that, but it is also about hope for the future and the societies that we're trying to build for the long term. And I guess related to that as well, the final point I would make on this is this question that the SDGs are not a shopping list where you pick out one thing or another. They relate quite closely, and they're very often interdependent. I find it frequently just in the world that I work in. I mean, as Habitat, we're very focused on SDG 11 and the question of safe and inclusive cities. But we very rarely discuss SDG 11 without talking about SDG 1 on poverty, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 10 on equality of outcome more generally, and then SDG 16 looking at peace and governance and fairness. So, and lots of the other preconditions for making those things possible exist in other goals. So not trying to rush and take too sectoral an approach, but thinking what are the interrelationships of different issues and what will produce the outcome that I'm after over time is a very centrally important element as well. I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you. And now the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Weitel, please.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I agree with what Robert said. But what I would like to say is a little bit more the deeper side of the SDGs. There might be arguments about what prevails when it comes to debates, like whether it is the human rights obligations of states, whether it is SDGs. He made it very clear that they are complementary. One depends on other. But what is important to understand is that the reality in which the SDGs were developed 7.5 years ago have changed significantly. I think we live in a situation that we did not foresee in 2015. And I give you an example. I was reading a report published by Oxfam in 2022. And one of the most revealing finding of the report was that inequality kills 4 people in every second. Right? This is a brutal reality that we live. And one of the key goal of the SDG is to promote equality. Equality based on gender, equality based on income status, equality based on income level, distribution, and so on. That's one thing that I wanted to highlight. Second, COVID was a eye-opening situation. Like what we committed, in terms of investing in public sector like health, education, social security, pension, and so on, the part of the SDGs. But we are nowhere closer to where we wanted to be. The one reality that was showed by COVID was that if we had invested enough in the health sector, public health sector, we could have saved more life. Right? That's a reality. So going back to the question, I think it's very important not to leave one SDG and focus on another SDG. I think all 17 SDGs are very, very important. The second point I would make is that the reality of every country and context is different. I think what we talk here in Austria and what is the situation in the South and middle income countries is different. I think they have different priorities than other countries that we have to realize. Two more points before I conclude related to the first question. One, whatever it is, I think we need to provide sufficient financing to implement the SDG commitment. I'll mention the example from Graz when it comes to housing in my response to the second question. But this has been one of the key challenges, even for the UN system, that we have commitment, we have obligations, but there is always a question of resource. And public health is one of the key examples. Inequality is another key example. I think there needs to be a lot of investment in the public sector in order for the SDGs to be realized. The second, in many contexts that we have seen, while the political commitments are there, it's very, very important to be politically committed. But the intentionality part, it also relates to resource mobilization. Are we intentionally implementing SDG 16, for example? Are we intentionally trying to reduce poverty? Are we intentionally trying to reduce inequality? Are we intentionally preventing gender-based violence? I think these are key questions. And we need to knock the doors and ask, is it intentional? Are you doing it deliberately? Is it just not the lip service? Just not, I think these questions are very, very important. Going to the second question, which is more on the human rights action plan. The examples from Graz, Guangzhou, I must mention Barcelona, Vienna, not to forget, of course. The example shows that political commitment is foremost. Without political commitment from the top, it's very difficult to implement any human rights action plan. That's the fundamental thing. And we're very glad to see Madam Mayor here with a lot of commitments and also to congratulate your work. So that's the first thing I would say. Second, using human rights norms and standards. Of course, in many contexts, it has been happening, which is very good and welcoming. But we also need to promote this to other contexts and other cities, and something I would call sisterhoods, like a sister city supporting another sister city to bring knowledge, capacity, and so on, but firmly grounded on international human rights norms and standards. The third point I wanted to highlight is the participatory approach when it comes to developing human rights action plan. Citizens' participation is very important. Participation, not just for participation, but a real meaningful participation where they can comment, suggest, criticize, and make the public official accountable. I think that's critical when it comes to participation. And the last point on that, which is twofold. I think when it comes to making human rights action plan, the objectives should look at the structural issues, structural barriers that are preventing the enjoyment of human rights in general, and economic, social, and cultural rights in particular. I think these are very, very important points. And the self-commitment. We heard from Graz this morning, the introduction of the policy, the commitment to mobilize resources that comes from the central government. These are good examples. I think what I wanted to emphasize is commitment and continuation of the commitment. I think that's very, very important, that we make commitment, but we don't leave it, and we continue to pursue. Thank you so much.
Yes, please do come back, Mr. Lewis Lettington.
Sorry, I didn't address the second question directly, and I think I'm quite happy with that, because I think Pradeep gave many of the responses, but just would like to add on a couple of things or to amplify a couple of things. An action plan at the end of the day, I mean, first, the fact that you want one is a very good start, because this question of political will is central. If you're doing it because you think you ought to, or because there's a book or a conference that told you should, it probably isn't going to go very far. But if you feel that this is something that you can use and that will serve your purposes, then it will go further, which means reflecting on why you want it and how you want to pursue it. The next one is this question of sort of resources, ambition, and these other things that come from political will. You need to have clear and relevant priorities. They need to reflect the way that things integrate, but you also can't back off them. I mean, one of the things I took away from discussions that we've had yesterday and this morning in Graz, there are things that you can prioritize that, as Pradeep rightly says, are quite structurally grounded, and that means they're really hard. You don't just sort of say, I'm going to change a document or put a bit more money into one thing or another, and that will fix it. It will take a long time. It will take changing of mindsets. It will take changing of behaviors. That means even when it's not going your way and it's not working and the money isn't there, you still have to push it anyway. So one of the other things I think about action plans is don't be discouraged. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, because the success will come at some point. It might not even come in your time working on it. It might be the next person or the person afterwards, but that doesn't mean that you don't keep pushing at it if it really is a clear priority and a need. Thank you.
Thank you. So continuing commitment in a similar way as you said. Now, this concludes the first round of discussions, which was about action plans as such and what is necessary to make them successful and effective. And now we come to the second round, which is about capacity building and training. And there is yet another encouragement in our outcome document, which is relevant here. It's about training. Now, the encouragement to the local communities to train local policymakers, local government staff, and future leaders in the development and implementation of the Human Rights Action Plan, and to inform civil society and affected populations about their role in human rights action plans, with the goal of strengthening local accountability. Once again, accountability, of course. And here I would like to ask the following questions. The following question is just one, and it will be addressed to Winnipeg and to Swansea. From your perspective, what kind of capacity building is needed the most regarding local human rights action plans? And I would like to ask Winnipeg first. Ali Raposo, can you hear me? And could you please comment on this question?
Absolutely. So I've kind of heard a lot of the similar conversations and a lot of the similar answers being shared today. And from my perspective, the capacity building tools that are needed most buy-in from your city council, your elected officials, and the public. So support from both the public and the public service is extremely helpful. And one of my panelists, Adele, alluded to this earlier, but some of the methods to obtain objectives as well as fiscal support. So this has been something talked about earlier as well. Fiscal support to pay for the public service members to develop things like matrices and frameworks and be able to implement and utilize those resources. So fiscal support makes it possible to aim for the bigger picture. So in terms of the most helpful is, a recap summary is city council, our elected officials, whether it's mayor or public, being able to utilize data and matrices where we kind of input data. And basically at the end of the day, fiscal support is an incredibly helpful tool when wanting to implement action plans for our city.
Thank you so much. And now we turn to Swansea. Is it Adele Dunstan who wishes to speak, or the other colleague from Swansea? Is Swansea online? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll take this one. So I thank you very much. I think the capacity building has been really important for us and a key and essential part of our journey. And we felt that not just for the policy writers and the decision makers in our public bodies, but also for our citizens and residents in the area that we serve as well. And maybe I'd just highlight a couple of ways that we've looked at this. So firstly, Adele mentioned already our Human Rights City Steering Group, which has brought the partners together to develop their action plans and share the action plans and best practice. And alongside that, we've been able to undertake some training which embeds that human rights approach. And that was developed in conjunction with the British Institute of Human Rights, who developed that bespoke training package that could be delivered to our elected leaders within the local authority, but also senior managers and policy writers across the sector to try and embed that approach within their organizations. And I think for us, a really key aspect of building capacity has been making sure that our citizens and public are aware of their human rights. And one of the ways in which we've done that is by developing a Rights in Your Pocket guide that we've undertaken with Swansea University as law school. And that is really a guide that details what human rights are, what human rights citizens have, and how they can find out information around that and support. And that's been distributed quite widely across the city in areas such as our public libraries, community centres, etc. But that really has enabled citizens to get connected to their human rights and build that capacity there. And so in a similar way, we've developed a guide for public bodies and organisations that the university has helped us with as well. And they've been able to develop workshops around that so that organisations can embed human rights within the organisation. And I think just picking up on the frameworks that we've used, a similar framework that we've used to embed a children's rights approach within our organisation. So having the principles of participation, empowerment, embedding and accountability, and having non-discrimination, that's enabled us to use that particular framework to ensure we can extend that to our broader human rights approach. And just also really picking up on one of the points Ali from Winnipeg made around the fiscal support and resources. I think that's really been key. And without that, it would be very difficult to take forward the work. And so we've been able to have a dedicated resource to invest in this within the local authority, including having a budget to have a position to take forward that work and assist other organisations in taking that forward. And that, I think, has really been key for us in taking that Human Rights City work forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. King. Thank you. Yes, the financial aspect is always key. Yes. Now, this was about training, and we heard insights on training and what certain cities do. And now we turn to the networks. And my questions will be to the networks I have here on my right. And the question is, how can your networks contribute to capacity building? What are you already offering? And in which areas would you like to develop future offers? What are promising settings for an exchange of experiences? And I would like to start with you, Madame Zarouk. Could you please let us know what you have to say on this question?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we're really very honored to be here again in Graz. We were, since the beginning, Professor Klaus, of this transformative dynamic to make sure that the human rights are protected, respected, implemented at the local and regional level. I like to quote Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. The strength of free people resides in town. Town institutions are to liberty what primary schools are to knowledge. Without the town institutions, a nation can pretend to have a free government, but it does not possess the spirit of liberty. Another evidence also is, and we have here the Honorable Mayor, we seems to forget that cities, towns, villages, communities are the only institution that impact the citizen's life from the birth until the death, including access and affording the basic public services. So for us in UCLG Africa, the regional section of UCLG World, SDGs are local by nature. And it was also recalled by the international community, 65% of this SDGs, but we forget also the climate change agenda, the new urban agenda, and so on. So for us and for the international community, it is among the responsibilities, the competences, and the role of local and regional government. So in UCLG Africa, and it's not obvious really, including in Africa, from African perspective. For us, empowering, building, and developing the capacities is one of our pillars of action. So we are doing a lot of advocacy. We attend a lot of forum at the global level, at the regional level, national level, but it's not enough, because we do believe that to succeed in decentralization, local government, local development, or territorial development, and it has said by our colleague here, if you are not in the position to have leaders, human resource managers, employees who are professional and who are work to be in the spirit of performance. So we need really to invest. And this is why we have the problems. It's about the resources. So in any local government, you will see that the budget, we travel a lot, but we don't allocate sufficient resources for the capacity building. But it's not enough. We need also to have a holistic approach from who are the target groups. Are we tackling the politicians? Are we tackling the human resource managers, the employees, the communities, etc.? And we need to have an enabling environment in terms of political will, but also the efficiency, the accountability, and also the inclusiveness. Who we are targeting in terms of capacity building. We need also to invest in sound partnership and also a resource mobilization in the spirit of the SDG number 17. So today, more than ever, mainstreaming human rights needs the whole of government and the whole of society approach to make sure that we will not leave.
Und nur dann können wir sicherstellen, dass wir
qu'on ne laisse personne en bord.
En ninguna parte del mundo.
Thank you so much, Madame Serouk. And now from Africa, we turn to Europe, to the European Coalition on Cities Against Racism. Madame Oboulon, please.
Yes, also from my side, thank you so much. Coming from Germany these days, probably the whole world knows there is like, well, right-wing extremist
Und die ganze Welt weit
that have majorities. And being here for me in Graz today, listening to the work that all of you do, it gives me a lot of hope and power. And that's also what motivates and drives us within the ECHA, right? To really use the power that cities bring. And when I talk about cities, I mean also all of you, right? The people that are there online now since 3 days, the people that are here and here with us that all show that cities are crucial agents and motors for change. So how do we do that in the ECHA as a network of 150 cities all across Europe committed to fighting racism? That is, of course, interlinked with human rights on all layers. So Assistant Director General Gabriela Ramos has mentioned that at the beginning. In the ECHA, we have a 10-point plan of action developed by our colleagues from the ETC here in Graz. So when a city enters the ECHA, they only enter with the political commitment to implement this 10-point plan of action. It's the ground, it's the foundation of what we do. And in this 10-point plan, you find very much all the different layers where local authorities can become active in the fight against racism, but of course, discrimination and human rights. So this is a first tool that I want to introduce that we as ECHA use, and where we also see that it's important that it's at the beginning, that we have the political commitment first before cities join our coalition. Then today we talk a lot about accountability. It's a crucial term, it's important. And this is why in the ECHA we have a reporting system where the cities every 2 years really report what they do to implement this plan. And our colleague from Barcelona introduced it also in the conference, but a crucial tool here is the multilingualism, right? To allow cities to report in their own languages. As ECHA, we're a European network, but we want cities really to benefit from the reports, to be held accountable also on the local level, right? And this data allows us as network, of course, also to understand what are the different challenges in our member cities. And I re-encourage, or I want to highlight also when it comes to accountability, the role of civil society and the different councils. Here we see that the 10-point plan of action is not only a tool for the city administration, but also for civil societies to hold politicians and the administration accountable. In addition to that, let me bring in 3 other tools we have. Again, thanks to the ETC here in Graz, we have a toolkit for equality, which I like to call like a cookbook for city administrations. It's a collection of good practices, of things that worked on the ground in the area of local policies for equality. We have this accessible in different languages where local authorities can learn and really benefit from one another. And we really see that it is crucial to collect what works, but not only to collect it, but also to analyze it and put it into a structure that then it can be replicated in different contexts. Another tool we use in the ECHA are working groups. So we create very thematic spaces, for example, focusing on anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism, anti-Muslim racism, equality data collection, where we allow peer-to-peer exchange for city administrations to learn from another and to use the synergies. And here, digitalization brings great potential because it's not necessary to always travel like we did today. You can just do it online. And we see it's crucial because in the ECHA, we don't only have capital cities, we also have smaller sized cities that don't have the budget nor the resources to travel and to come to Graz. So for them to use the power of digitalization, it's really crucial. And you asked also, what are future offers? So here we see that more and more we want to tackle also forms of structural racism, which means we want to see also how institutions like the cities reproduce racism. And for that, action plans are again an important instrument, because to work on that, first of all, we need to know, we need to get data where institutional racism happens. So this is something that we plan to do. And of course, we see a lack of equality data, like probably in many cities all across Europe. So also here we are developing tools to support our member cities in the collection of this data to actually know what is happening on the ground and really create policies that work for the people. So I leave it here. I could continue, but I guess it's a good overview that shows how this exchange and the power of networks can be used.
Thank you so much. So the challenge of reporting, multilingualism, the importance of digitalization. Thank you very much. But we have an additional contribution from you, Madame Sarouk.
If you allow me, Your Honor, it is about tools. So you know that when we start localizing the SDGs, we have now what we name the voluntary local review. Based on what the governments and states are doing with the voluntary national review. So each year we are empowering, preparing, capacitating our members through a survey that is drafted and disseminated by our umbrella in Barcelona, UCLG World. So maybe after we have finalized the outcome documents, we can afford it in multiple language. In Africa, we use Portuguese, French, English, and Arabic. How to make sure that this voluntary local review tools can integrate and mainstream these documents. So when we talk about localizing SDGs, and of course, each year we're tackling 1 or 2 or 3 SDG based on what the high-level political forum and ECOSOC will decide. So it's a good exercise with the support of the center to see how we can put this coherence between what our members, the National Association or the cities are doing to localize the SDGs, and how we can integrate and mainstream these wonderful and timely documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now this concludes our second round of discussion on capacity building. And now we turn to the third and last round, which is on networking. Now, I think those, all of us who are here do not have to be convinced of the importance of networking, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And we are very glad for the contribution of the Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional levels here in Graz for organizing with partners this academy and for bringing together people to network already here. But also our outcome document has encouragements for networking, and I will read them out and then put questions to the international organizations representatives here. So the encouragements are to share effective methods for developing, monitoring, and updating human rights action plans with peers at the local, national, and international levels, as well as through networks and fora. So share methods. And then form alliances, here we are, at the local, regional, national, and international levels, encourage knowledge sharing, join existing networks, and seek exchanges with peers, regional, national, international actors and organizations, as well as civil society, academia, the private sector actors, to promote accountability through human rights action plans around the world. Now you have heard these encouragements, and I would now like to put the following question to our representatives of international organizations here, of the UN here actually. Do you have plans for the future to form or support such alliances and promote the exchange of knowledge? And please, Mr. Louis Letting, will you please be the first to reply to this?
Sure, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll get the negative part of my answer out of the way first, which is that sadly, very often member states are not keen to invest in this area of work. And unfortunately for us as the UN, if member states don't give us the budget or give us the mandate and the authorization to go forward with things, it's very difficult. So that is a sort of preface to say that's why sometimes our approach has come across as a little fragmented and sporadic. On the plus side, I think there are a number of different things that would be relevant. We do have within UN Habitat, which I think is fairly common for a lot of UN agencies, particularly those with a strong development and operational focus. We do have a number of networks that we either host or are fairly closely associated with. For example, I'm the secretary of one, the Global Land Tool Network, which is very focused on land administration tools. It's not so much about the advocacy and the lobbying side, although that is important, but it's about the how-to of providing security of tenure. And we're very committed to something that I think has also been reflected in the Graz experiences that have been shared. Tenure doesn't just mean private ownership. There's a whole load of different ways of providing people security in the land and the houses that they occupy. We also have a network on slum transformation, which is predictably mostly focused on developing countries. We are a significant participant in European networks like Housing 2030, which is very much pushing for housing reform and advances in many areas. So those are the orthodox networks that normally the approach is very open and low cost. These are not networks that charge fees or demand particular strong conditions. And wherever possible, we try to support the active participation of those who don't have the resources to come to meetings and things. And I very much agree with what was said by Evelyn, that the digital world makes that an awful lot easier. Plus, the way in which the COVID experience made us use all these tools that we had. It's typical of the human mentality that we have loads of clever tricks and we don't use them until we're forced into it. I would quickly move, though, to where I think often things are more important is around events and issues. We will often have quite semi-formal to informal networks around those. Politically, it can be difficult sometimes to have a formal network on one or the other issue because we're required to work with all member states and all points of view. But that doesn't mean that you're not engaging with a wide range of partners. So in that line, I would highlight some of the things that we have coming up from a Habitat point of view. We have the World Urban Forum, which this year will be in Cairo. And is very much focused on your issues. It is focused on localizing the SDGs and local solutions. And there is a wide range of themes within that and a huge range of options for participation, and usually anywhere from 10 to 20,000 participants. So it is a big show with a very diverse audience. You can go online and submit suggestions for partnerships and things like that, and we would be very happy to connect people with others as well. Similarly, there is a housing working group that's just been established. It's a state-led body. It will be member states discussing issues such as what is good housing policy, monitoring what the state of achievement of adequate housing around the world is, and then monitoring the types of activities that are being undertaken. We've been asked to prepare reports mapping what is being done. That is definitely something that a group like this could get involved with. The cities themselves directly putting forward what they see. And I would hope that everybody here can work on convincing the Austrian government to invest in that kind of process to bring forward the Austrian experiences, which are obviously diverse amongst different cities, but Austria has been a leader in innovating in many areas of housing, and the mayor here is a great example of that. So I think if that can be brought forward in a way, that is a form of networking and putting forward one's greatest things. The last one I would add in that list is there's a current process that was particularly championed by France, coming from local governments and local planners on smart cities and inclusion and effectively rights-based approaches to smart cities that proposes to develop guidelines. So engaging with those processes, getting experts at the table, sharing your experiences is all extremely important. And we will always do what we can to push those kinds of things forward and make them as inclusive as we can. And finally, of course, we are, as the UN, we are a secretariat. You know, we go back to the bureaucratic language, but we are servants. We are there to do principally historically what member states ask us to do. But as you've heard, I hope in our comments, we pay a lot of attention to what stakeholders, constituents, beneficiaries, rights holders, whatever you want to call them, what they perceive as their problems and challenges and what they need. And we try to respond to that wherever we can. So if there are things that aren't being done, we are really happy to try and work with you and try and fill the gaps and take things forward where that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to Mr. Wegel, you're a bit too modest in just referring to yourself as servants, because we need your encouragement. We need your expertise in what we are doing here. Now, you said that you wished Austria to take an active part in this new housing working group. I think that's a very interesting development that there's now this group, and some of us here may be able to influence the Austrian government. So could you tell us a little bit more when this group will meet, where it will meet, and what the plans are?
I won't give you chapter and verse, but I'm quite happy to share further information in more detail. The rough outline, as best we know it at the moment, the key decisions will be made they've been delegated to the executive board of the Habitat, which will meet in early May. So that will decide the date, duration, and the agenda probably. We are reasonably confident at the moment that the first meeting is likely to be either October or December of this year. There are a couple of dates on the table that I can share. It'll probably be a 2 or 3 day session. It'll be all member states will be invited to participate. Normal observer practices will follow the UN practice of ECOSOC registration and things like that. But we as the Secretariat are committed to trying to make the process as accessible as we can. That will include pushing for diverse contributions to background documents and things like that. Some of the issues, just to highlight, that we know will be on the table on the first session. The relevance and the success or otherwise of Habitat's own program of work on adequate housing, which goes back quite a long way. We've also been asked to provide information on multilateral and bilateral interventions in adequate housing, mapping what's being done by who, which I think will be important for highlighting the relative balance of investments in different types of housing solutions. Is everything being pushed into enabling financing and construction, or is more going into social housing and public housing, or collectives and cooperatives, being able to get a better picture of what's going on? And we've been asked to start building up an online database of best practices in housing policy. So, for example, being able to write up the Graz or the Vienna experience and to include that, not so much at a rhetorical level, but looking at these were the levers and the tools that we used. This was what was hard. This is what worked. These questions of, need, for example, it was highlighted in an earlier discussion, a long-term strategy for acquiring land is very central. A public role in the housing market that isn't simply focused on housing for the poorest or the homeless, but has a broader approach of shaping the market is important. These kinds of things and how they're done will be extremely important for other countries from all regions. And I think that bringing that kind of thing, we know that we will be invited to put that information on the table. As I say, I'm very happy to follow up with further details and options as those evolve. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this additional information. Now, Mr. Wegel, you have very patiently been waiting. The question to you, please, about the support for.
Thank you so much. we believe in partnership. It's not possible to accomplish the achievements alone. I think if we did together, we probably will make a road further a success. So that's the first statement I wanted to make. Talking about partnership, we have just in 2022 signed a memorandum of understanding with the UCLG. The objective was to operationalize some of these commitments that we are making at the local level. So the MOU is significant to that extent. We have also been working closely with the UNESCO Center here, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, a number of other local governments and central governments, of course. The Guangzhou city, which has been leading the work on human rights and local governments in Asia. So these are some of our examples where we are working very closely with the local government. There are two other information that I wanted to share. The Human Rights Council that gives us mandate, the political body that gives us mandate, has asked us to establish a knowledge hub. It was, the resolution was adopted in October last year, 54/22. The idea which we are conceptualizing now is to create a hub that brings all promising practices that we spoke, including in this area, makes it available to whoever wants to use it, including local government, cities, civil society, individual stakeholders. We are hoping to have translation capacity so that it is made available in many languages, not only limited to UN language. It includes good practices, as I said, promising practices, and also we're hoping to create a platform where some of the work that is happening here in Graz, Vienna, Strasbourg, Barcelona, Guangzhou, the cities I remember from my interaction, and there are many that I don't remember, can be plugged into, and other sister cities can see what has been achieved there, what can be done if there's real willingness to do things, and so on. So that's in plan. We are hoping to create it by the third quarter of this year. It also depends on resources, of course, but there has been commitment by the member states that they will fund this knowledge hub. So that's a progressive news. The mandate also coming from the Human Rights Council relates to capacity building and training for the local authorities and local governments. While we have a significant level of political mandate, it has not been supported with operational resources. So many of our trainings and capacity buildings have been limited on doing it online. We were able to do some in-person training, for example, in Kenya, to provide the human rights program for the local authorities. There were plans to go further, but it was not supported by the resources. As we speak, we are finalizing a report for the Human Rights Council that will be discussed in the 56th session. And the idea of the discussion would be around how to provide technical support and capacity building for local governments so that they are able to implement their obligations and provide services to their people. So we'll see how the outcome would be, but this is the direction that we're heading. The establishment of the knowledge hub, as I mentioned, the forthcoming discussion at the Human Rights Council, and our ongoing partnership, which we are all heading to support, where we can support, provide advice and guidance, and technical ideas and tools and methodologies. So that's the priority for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, turning once again to Austria. We have 3 human rights cities here in Austria. So what can be done by Austria or in Austria to improve networking between human rights cities in general? Now, my question is to you, Mr. Lesegang. What can the Austrian Association of Cities and Towns do to support such networking, and what are the benefits? Please.
Danke für die Frage. Netzwerken ist unser tägliches
Thank you very much for your question. Networking is our daily work. On the one hand side, we represent interests. We represent the interests of our member towns and municipalities, especially with regards to the Austrian federal level. And we are also a platform of exchange, because the knowledge that the Association of Cities and Towns has is only for a very small fraction happening in the office. The knowledge is actually mostly in the towns and cities. So even though we make a comment on laws, for example, this is sent to the cities and towns. The results come in and we sum it up and pass it on, because this is where the knowledge is. And the same thing happens in all other areas. We have 40 different committees. Almost every topic that comes up in a town or in a city where there are committed staff members, well, they meet and exchange. And when new topics come up, then it's most of the time bottom up. So the cities come with their need. For example, they say, we'd like an exchange on this and that. There's a need for exchange on this and that. Are there any other towns or cities with the same issue or problem? And then a committee is created upon a formal decision of the management board. We also have a series of informal networks. For example, we had a network concerning European subsidies or subsidies programs to promote them, for example. Agenda 2030 is also something that is part of our work now, or more part of our work now. And I'd be open when I say there we don't see a very big engagement or commitment in terms of the cities. We also have an internet platform called Communal Sustainability. And not only member states from the Association of Cities and Towns, but any towns and cities can log on and share experiences from SDGs, with the SDGs, and they can also share knowledge from other cities and towns. I'm saying many words, but what am I trying to say? If you feel a need that this topic should be discussed in a network, we'd be happy to do that. Collaborating in these networks is something that is also voluntary, of course. So we can communicate the idea, we can make the offer, we can also communicate it several times. But whether it will work out, well, that's something that we will have to see. I'm going to be cautious at the moment, and I won't give a definite prognosis right now.
It's an issue of personal commitment, continuing personal commitment. We have a good example of continuing personal commitment here in the room. Director Stahl, he's the next one. What could the Graz-based center, the UNESCO Center, do to support local governments in these endeavors? Please.
Vielen Dank für die Einladung.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me or us. I'd like to present us, all of those who don't know us very well yet. Mr. Thun-Hohenstein said that in his speech. The Republic of Austria, together with UNESCO, created a UNESCO Category 2 center in Graz at the European Training Center for Human Rights. The province of Styria and the city of Graz were also very much part on the foundation of this center. Our mandates are manifold, but what's important to say is, and I believe this is a central point of what we do, it's building bridges between the international and the local. So this is an intermediary function, a mediation function that we have amongst different actors within or who work in the implementation of human rights. We've heard that everywhere, civil society and governments and the parliaments and so on and so forth. But you have to know that they don't really talk to each other, amongst each other. They need someone who is an intermediary, and this is one of our tasks. In other words, we are a multi-level governance organization with different levels of governance that don't talk to each other or cannot talk to each other for formal reasons. They cannot do that for formal reasons because it's complicated when they want to speak to each other. This is something that the colleagues from UN also mentioned. These types of communications can be complicated, but it's not complicated with us because you can just send us an email regardless of from which level. Perhaps Madam Mayor sends me an email and says, please, can you tell that to the governor? And I say, yes, I can forward this message to the governor, no problem. And the governor answers or not. But that's not a problem. And this is how we work. And this is also why it works. This is why it's possible to create this round of people who is here today, for example. And that's something very nice that we do. It's great to meet, but we don't only meet for the sake of meeting. But it's nice to get together and talk in a less formal way as well. But it does have a purpose. The purpose is that we want to organize capacity building together. This is what we all do. This is also something that has been mentioned. We're doing this in different shapes and forms. So what has been mentioned, for example, was digitalization. And maybe you've been wondering already, why is Mohamed Alaman standing next to me? Mohamed Alaman, in 2015, he had to leave Syria for reasons that are known, and he came to Austria. He went to school in Austria. He started studying. He was interested in digital things. And why is he standing here? Well, I'd like to present him. He is the head of development of this reporting system, the one we talked about yesterday, the one that UNESCO has mentioned already, the one that Gabriela Ramos mentioned. Evie talked about it, and we said, okay, well, the face is actually here. The person who did this is here in the room. And then I decided, well, why not? Thanks for coming, Mohamed. We found a company in Graz. We weren't looking for a refugee or something. We didn't care about it at all. He did excellent work with his team in all languages. And we were even now asked at the Academy, because the international coalition is made up of 7 different coalitions, and we were asked whether other coalitions could do the same. And now I'd like to ask you, Mohamed, would you like to do that for the Arab coalition too? Yes, I would. In a nutshell, yes, I would. Yeah, he'd be happy to do that. And also for the Asian Pacific coalition. Mohamed, would you like to say a few words? Thank you very much, Klaus, for presenting me. I actually hijacked him. I just asked him if he wouldn't mind coming out and saying something, and if he would mind to say something. Well, thank you, Klaus, as I've said. Thank you for the nice presentation that you've just done. And thank you that I may be part of this event today. When I came here in 2015, I did not imagine that I would be standing here today. I'd like to thank my team, Paragraph Software. I'd like to thank Klaus, and I'd like to thank the team from Heidelberg, because without them, this project would not have been possible the way it is possible, or we wouldn't have come that far. And with my background, it gives me a lot of hope to be part of this project, and it motivates me to work in other projects such as this one. And I'd love to do that in the Arab or Asian region. I'd love to participate. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mohamed. There are 2 things that I would like to add. How do we work? What do we do? How are we trying to bring all of these aspects together? I'd like to share one example with you because that might be important for Africa, for example. Also for Najat Zarub, who we talk a lot with about decentralization, for example, discussions that are really important. And I would like to mention one example with the Congress, for instance, of the communities and municipalities of the with the center of the with the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. We used the tool of the for local self-governance, and we were able to introduce human rights at local level. And with a decentralization project, we created 13, or we adopted 13 human rights cities in Georgia. And this was mainly our part. We had a human rights council or advisory board or a human rights forum. This was created by us there. This is a council that is in contact with the governments on human rights. And when we did that, we learned how effective this tool of local self-governance is, of decentralization can be. I know there is also a convention, a very similar one, for the African Union, but it's not in force yet. And I think it's a very, very important instrument also in other regions of the world to formally enshrine human rights at the local level with the legal framework that goes with it. This is one example that I would like to mention. And the second one is something that we do within the framework of capacity building at a very low or small level. So when somebody says, yeah, you're working in education, now you need to consider the right to education. No, this is not our approach. Our approach is, oh, you work in the educational field. So basically you are working in the field of human rights. And this creates a lot of openness. It creates a completely different climate at work. One of our last projects, for example, was the following. Leaderships of the city of Villach, or the town of Villach. All leaders were trained by us on their responsibility if there were sexual or racist harassment within their work at their community or the municipality. And this was our approach. We said, it's not about liability and responsibility. Yes, it also is that. But the approach was the following. What do I need to do to make sure that the human rights perspective is also always included? It was very successful. We had very good feedback. And in fact, all leaders from the municipality of the town of Villach attended the training. There were several rounds of the training. They had 100%, we had 100% coverage. Just to give you an impression on the work that we are doing here, everywhere around the world, wherever we're asked to work. And we also do that digitally, thanks to Mohammed and his team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a very strict timetable here, but I have heard that Madame Zaruk wishes to tell us about the situation in Africa, replying to Director Stahl, and then we will conclude. Please.
I really appreciate that you give me the floor, because we cannot afford ourselves to leave Graz with discouragement. So we need to see how we can honor this outcome documents. And I think network is net worth. So in UCLG Africa is a tradition. We have a lot of networks, and we are a member of a global network. I think we need to share this document with the UCLG World in Barcelona. So they have their annual retreat in 19 in Barcelona. It could be a good opportunity to share these documents and to bring input from the 7 regional sections, including ours in Africa. We have a sound network for female elected officials in Africa, Refela, created since 2011 and led today by the Honorable Mayor of Banjul in Gambia. They are working on global campaign and African campaign to end the violence against women, zero tolerance to violence, street children, and also economic empowerment of women. So there's a lot of good experience that we can share with you, but definitely we need to have this global network of human rights driving oriented cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No, we do not want to leave this conference with discouragement. On the contrary, we want to be encouraged, and we have this outcome document with a number of encouragements which we have discussed here in this on this panel. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the panelists that have contributed to this discussion, both those present and also those online. And I apologize once again for not having them introduced in time, but only a bit late. So thank you very much. And thank you, audience, for your interest. And this gives me now the opportunity to ask the Mayor of Graz once again to address us. Please, Madame K. Please.
Thank you
very much, Ambassador Tichy, for the facilitation of this discussion. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this joint discussion, for debating important questions. We heard a lot of overlapping issues. I take home a lot of what I've heard here. I would like to thank the sound engineers, all the other engineers from the Austrian Broadcasting Studio here in Graz. Thank you also for the simultaneous translation. Thank you for the translators' work. I was using the interpreters' work. I would like to thank the interpreters. I would like to thank the team here who take care of us. I'd like to thank the team, Klaus Stadl and his colleagues. Thank you very much also to the audience. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making inputs. Thank you also for the people online at home in front of their notebooks or desktops. It's so nice to talk to people from other cities, from other countries. This is something that I've always enjoyed throughout my life, meeting people from other areas, from other cities, from other countries. Whether it's me being abroad or me meeting people here in Graz who come from different countries, learning about the conditions in which they work, no matter where they are in the world. So it is important. It is important where you are born, where you grow up. It makes a difference. And it is important that we make sure that there is equality and that there is that we fight for human rights. We all agree that they are important, but there are other forces who want to counteract human rights. Exploitation, inequality, and despising different groups of people is something that must not be accepted. Unfortunately, this is something that happens not only in Austria, but in the whole of Europe and also in the world. And this is why I, as the mayor of our city, think that I am in a privileged situation because we had pioneers in our city who fought for better conditions, conditions that we now take for granted. And it is even more important because I know of my predecessors who fought for this. Therefore, it is even more important for me and my colleagues to continue to promote equality and make sure that it is never undermined. And I know that I'm in a good position because we have excellent NGOs, we have excellent people in our city, and the best tool of monitoring is the individual citizen because they are the people who judge us by our work, whether it's at the political level or at other levels. And this is something that we must never forget. It is the citizens, it is the people who judge our work. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words at the end of this discussion. Thank you very much. It was a great honor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor and Ambassador Tichy and the panelists, and thank you to the mayor. The mayor that she has expressed already her gratitude to the team that has really, with all the emphasis and knowledge, made it possible that we could have this conference today in this form. I would like to name from the team of the UN Center, Wanda Tiefenbacher and Livia Perschi and her, the entire team of the center, but also the interpreters, as you have mentioned already. So really, a really complex and amazing and clever Life Voice startup. I think they have done an excellent job. We have reached now the end of this conference, and I would really like to thank all the participants present and online for their input, and all the watching this conference around the world, and all these contributions that has been said today will also go into the publication. You know, all the previous conferences and academies were laid down in the publication, and this is already in preparation, as I know. Allow me also finally to congratulate the acting director of the UNESCO Center and his team for this fascinating conference again, which I'm certain will have implications on the practical implementation of human rights at the local and regional level. It was Klaus Stahl's vision quite a couple of years ago, that the professional capacities and experiences of the European Training Center in Graz could best be developed in the framework of an UNESCO Category 2 center. And I'm more than happy that the prolongation of the center for the next years seems to be secured. I'm very positive and optimistic. It should only be a couple of days that we have the final confirmation, and that we can look forward to the 5th Academy and conference in 2025. And I really hope that we see each other again next year. Thank you.
Vielen, vielen Dank, Renate.
Thank you very much, Renate. I'd like to ask Ambassador Brzezinski to say a few words on behalf of the Austrian Ministry for European and International Affairs. Thank you very much, Director Stahl, Madam Kicker. It is a pleasant task that I have now. I would like to thank you most warmly. It's impressive, what you achieved. At the second of this conference, I had the honor of opening the conference, and I said, if something happens 3 times in Austria, it is a tradition. This is already the 4th event, and I congratulate you on that, and I would like to thank all the people who have made it possible. I would also like to thank the panel and the 2 keynote speakers, Mr. President and the Deputy Secretary General, Ms. Ramos. Thank you for your inputs. I was impressed how disciplined the panelists were. Each of the contributions was inspiring, was innovative, and the dots were definitely connected. Chapeau. It's my great pleasure to tell you, Madam Mayor, if you permit, I'd like to thank you, by the way, on behalf of the minister. The Styrian government accepted last year, and the municipality of Graz will do so next week. So let me come to this pleasant news. The financing, the funding of the center will be secured for the next 5 years, and the official go will be given at the meeting of the Municipal Council next week. I was asked to keep my statement short. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the Austrian Ministry of European and International Affairs. As from 2 weeks, we will be debating with UNESCO the continuation of this important project. And you can imagine how happy I was when Madam Ramos found such appreciative words today. And I would like to thank you all. Professor Stadl and his dedicated team have done a tremendous job. This is something that is not a matter of course, and I would like to thank him and his team for this achievement, and we will do our utmost to continue the funding of this ETC category 2 for the next few years. And I would like to thank you and congratulate you, Professor Stahl, and your team. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think we have the right engineers here who can set the tone to make sure that you don't see my blushing because of these pleasant words. Everything has been said, but not by everyone. I would also like to say thank you. Thank you to our mayor, to our guests, to our participants, to President Kurz, to everybody who made this possible, everybody who helped us, the interpreters who made sure that we understand each other. I think that is the most important aspect of all of this. And we would also like to thank the team of Livia and Wanda, Mohammed, Markus, Isabella, Sarah, Hertwig, and of course, Renate, my colleague. And I'd also like to thank Professor Wolfgang Benedek, who I would like to mention here. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. And if I did forget somebody, it's just because I'm nervous. I'm sorry about that. But after the conference before the conference, it was already mentioned. The next conference, the 5th conference, will take place again on the same day next year on the 8th of February. This is the final conference of the Academy. The 8th of February is the day when the city of Graz adopted the acceptance of adopted the Human Rights Declaration. And I have a few final words. And I will say these words in English. I will just repeat what a participant of the Academy said. She said, and I quote her,
"Cannot control homelessness, poverty, race, dementia, mental illness, even for human rights activism. This is why bringing human rights home is so important." Dankeschön.